We hold these truths to be self-evident.
It's not a rerun if you do a new intro. This is Wrestling World Domination Remastered.
Hello everyone, welcome to an all-new episode of Wrestling World Domination Remastered. I am Bob Hazelwood. I cannot believe it's been nearly 6 years since we last uploaded an episode of the show. That's on me, I guess. I'm just not very fast at this editing thing. This episode is a special one to me because of our guests, Joe Pedicino and Boni Blackstone. Most of you remember Joe as the founding force behind the Global Wrestling Federation, which is where Terry and I first met. In fact, it's fair to say that without Joe and Boni, there never would have been a Wrestling World Domination podcast to begin with. This episode was originally recorded in 2014. Listening to it has brought back a lot of fond memories. I hope you enjoy this as much as I did.
Joe, what exactly, give me a little background here, okay, for the listeners. What got you into the wrestling business? What was your very first thing as far as the wrestling business? What was your first job?
Well, I was in radio and television advertising sales. I had been a wrestling fan most of my life, but I went to work for a local TV station here in Atlanta. At that time, it was WATL, and I was selling for them. And after I had been there no more than 2 months, I was in the program director's office, and he was upset because his wrestling show wasn't doing any ratings. And he said, wrestling all across the country is really taking off and doing great, but my wrestling's not doing anything. And not being one to be shy, I said, well, you're running the wrong show and you're running it at the wrong time. But other than that, and I got that look from him like, oh, and you've been here now with us now for what, 2 months? But I explained to him he was running the show out of Memphis, which was one of the best shows, and he was running it, though, at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. And so as we took the time to talk, I explained to him that he was running the equivalent of a soap opera and not ever telling any of the blow-offs. In other words, you'd hear Jerry Lawler talk about what he was going to do to Bill Dundee Monday night, but then when they came back the next week, they didn't talk about that anymore. And so I said, you're getting everybody's attention up about something, but then you don't tell them what happened. And I said the second thing is most of the wrestling fans, they're not watching TV at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. So he said, well, when would you run it? I said, well, I'm going to tell you when you should run it. You're not going to, but you should. I said, you ought to run it at 8 o'clock on Saturday night in prime time. And I explained to him the reason he should do that. I had him take out a rating book, and I said, look at TBS and tell me what kind of ratings do they have at 7:45. And he said, oh, they blow the doors off. They've got 6s and 7s. And I said, so in other words, there's a 6 to a 7 rating of wrestling fans at 7:45, and at 8 o'clock, they all go somewhere else. What if they, at 8 o'clock, were told, hey, we've got an hour of great wrestling, just turn the dial. And I said, what you've got to do is you're going to have to put a host in there like Elvira and let them get in touch with Memphis and find out what happened Monday night and let them tell everybody what happened and do the show. And so they came back to me in about 2 or 3 days and said, we like your idea. We want to do it. We want you to host it. And I said, guys, anybody that can look at me, I've got a face and a body for radio. And, but they talked me into it. And we put that together with an AWA hour and put together 2 hours of wrestling, and we called it Superstars of Wrestling. And that was how it all
What year was that, Joe?
Oh, Lord. 1985.
85. Okay.
Yeah. But that grew to be a 7-hour block of wrestling shows hosted by me. And then after a short time, I figured out I was going to have a co-host because there was too much going on, and it just didn't look good for me just to be sitting there just talking about it. And I came up with the idea of, instead of bringing on some guy, to bring on a woman. And back then, Cherry, you'll remember, there weren't too many women in wrestling who were known for being intelligent.
That's correct. Mostly for their looks, right?
Yeah. And so I said, I want to find a woman who can stand here with me and will be an intelligent wrestling fan. So we decided to do a on-air contest. And we told women, if you'd like to come on and be, co-host with Joe, send us your resume and a picture and everything. I thought we'd get 3 or 4, might want to do it. We ended up with, if I remember correctly, 130 something. We actually put 64 of them on the air. We said, let's do on-air tryouts. So they all came on and did 2 segments with me at a time. And we started out with 64 and narrowed it down to 8. And we brought those 8 back in and picked from that. And I had told my producers I was not going to make the final choice. That I didn't want it to be personal. So you guys, I had 7 guys working, the program director and everything. And I said, y'all decide. When we get right into it, y'all pick the one, and that's what it'll be. Well, right toward the end of the tryouts, in walks this perky little beautiful blonde, and I'm looking at her. I'm thinking, well, she can't be more than 18, 19 years old. And then on top of that, she had an attitude. So
I know that
came on and,
little blonde.
she came on and did 2 segments with me, and at the end of the night, when we got through doing it, I walked over to my producer and I said, well, I know one who it ain't going to be. And they all looked at me and said, I hope you ain't talking about the blonde. I said, oh, hell yeah. I said, did you hear her up there? I said, did you hear her attitude? And they all looked at me. And then when it was all over, they came to me and said, all right, now you remember, you said you weren't going to make the decision. The decision's up to us. Yeah. Well, it's unanimous, 7-0. Blackstone will be here starting next week.
Ricky will get the place, baby.
So she ended up doing it. And let me tell you something, for the first, 2 months, 3 months that we were doing it, it was a chilly business relationship. And
a chilly business relationship, huh?
But we ended up, God knew what he was doing. We ended up going to the Christmas party together, and the next thing you knew, we were seeing each other. And the funny thing is, we didn't tell anybody at the station. We dated for a year without telling them at all. They still, we still acted frosty toward one another on taping day. But we would sit there and tape, and then we'd leave and then go meet up somewhere, and then go out and eat or go up to my house or whatever. And when the day came that we announced to the world that we were seeing each other, I thought my producers were going to die. They couldn't believe it.
And they probably thought, oh my gosh, it's going to kill the on-air personalities.
But it didn't. We didn't let on. But
no, absolutely not.
She turned out to be
a fantastic story.
She turned out to be one of the biggest finds in wrestling at the time. Let me tell you.
Well, absolutely. I'd never heard that story, Joe. darn glad you shared that one with us. That's over the top, really.
But that's how Boni and I both got into the wrestling business.
So you both basically got into it almost at the same time, within, 6 months of each other?
Yeah, I'd been on the air, I think, for maybe 6 months when we did this. But just to be honest, here in Atlanta, we became pretty popular. We hosted not only wrestling, but we hosted movies, and we went out and did all kinds of appearances and public things. We were the first people in wrestling to be presenters at the Emmy Awards. They could not believe at the Emmys that they were introducing Joe Pedicino and Boni Blackstone of Superstars of Wrestling as presenters. So
that is great.
But, we went on to do the syndicated pro wrestling this week that was on in 90 cities across the country. We went through a lot of fun and effort to put Global together and got it on ESPN. So, we were seen, as you know, Terry, being on ESPN, wrestling fans all across the world saw you and knew who you were.
Absolutely. It definitely opened doors for me. I'm sure it opened doors for you. Let's talk about Global. We've got other things to touch on because there's so much as far as your career goes, yourself and Boni, and what you've done for the wrestling business in general. But I do want to hit on Global while we're on the conversation on that topic. Explain to us how Global came about. I know that it wasn't exactly what it was supposed to be or what you wanted it to be in the beginning stages, but take us through Global.
Well, unfortunately, we had gotten involved. A good business acquaintance of mine brought to me this gentleman from Nigeria. Now, this was before everybody knew and found out about all the Nigerian scams. Remember that. This was before all that. But this gentleman presented himself to us as this multimillionaire businessman from Nigeria, and he just loved wrestling, and he loved what we were doing in Atlanta, and he wanted to start a national alliance. We came up with the name, Global, but he was going to fund it, and he showed us, he showed me, and he showed Jerry Jarrett, and he showed the TV people out in Dallas, all of this paperwork showing, how the money he was willing to put in and everything. So we got it started, and we started talking about it and started gathering things together. And, then unfortunately, as, it happens, right at the last minute, we find out that the guy is a fraud. And, we've got everything lined up to start the Global Wrestling. And all of a sudden we find out we don't have any money. So everybody involved scraped and did everything we could, and we were still able to put together the Global Wrestling Federation and get it on. You'll have to excuse the noise. I'm at home with my birds who have just decided that it's time to start mouthing off.
And that's okay. I've had birds in the past, and I know there's not a thing you can do about that.
Well, you can shoot them.
Yeah, you can shoot them, but Bonnie's liable to shoot you if you do.
There you have it, exactly. But anyway, so Global got on ESPN, and it was by, I'm not going to lie, it was by the skin of our teeth, and it was through the hard work of some people, and through a lot of help from Jerry Jarrett, and we got it on the air. And all of a sudden, there was a national wrestling organization based out of the Sportatorium, and it just, it took off. ESPN had it on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the ratings for Global at 4 o'clock in the afternoon were just through the roof. People were really watching it and enjoying it. And one of the things that we think helped a lot was we believed in being innovators. I believed in not looking at the past and saying, it has to be that way. So we did things like putting Boni out in the audience, and right in the middle of a match, we'd go to Boni, and Boni'd be there with one of the people who were watching, and they'd make a comment about the match, and we'd go back, and we let people write in and ask the wrestlers questions, and Boni would be up there and do that. I did a news segment, and one of the things that I think we're probably the best known for was we talked about wrestling. We talked to the wrestling fan, and we didn't treat them like all they ever watched was Global. So when I did my news segment, I told them what was going on in the WWF, told them what was going on in WCW, and of course what was going on in Global. And when we started doing that, man, people went nuts, especially wrestlers. Couldn't believe that we were talking about all of wrestling and not just us. And
well, there was an unwritten rule back then. I know from wrestling in the 80s that if you were in a territory, you didn't talk about another territory. All you talked about was that territory. And
right.
You were the first to incorporate the other federations into the TV show. And I remember, the wrestlers, of course, we didn't see the finished product. Everything was shot in different segments, so you'd have to actually see the show. We would film the show and watch it back a lot of times, and I can remember thinking, man, this is different. But I thought to myself it was very unique and trend-setting because you weren't treating the wrestling fans like idiots. And they all knew the different organizations. A lot of them were watching the wrestling show because it was a wrestling show.
Yep. And our whole thing was, the way I explained it to everybody, was that wrestling fans are wrestling fans. And if you're going to have any integrity, if I'm going to be a newsman, which was what I was supposed to be, I was supposed to be like a journalist. Well, how could I have integrity if all I ever talked about was what happened in Global? If Hulk Hogan just won the WWF World title and I'm a news journalist, am I not going to talk about that? And there were some people in the business who, I thought for a time there was a bounty on my head, but it turned out to be a very popular thing. And we tried to do that. We tried very hard not to treat a wrestling fan like they were lowbrow and foolish. We were people. A lot of people don't realize this, but we were one of the very first TV shows to do away with what was called squash matches. Every other wrestling show, they took a star and put him in there against an up-and-comer and just let him beat the hell out of him. And,
right.
We didn't do that. We put matches together that, had, good quality people against each other. And another thing we did was we took people who were up-and-coming and we put them in there and gave them a chance. We brought you in and said, we didn't bring you in and say, okay, you're going to go in and you're going to help make our stars look good. We brought you in and said, Terry, we like what you do and we like the look you have in the ring, and we're going to put you in some good matches and give you the opportunity to show the wrestling fans what you can do. And if they catch on and they like what you do, then, you're going to have a good shot. And you took advantage of it, and you became a real favorite of the fans. It didn't take you very long at all to be main eventing and going after one of the titles there.
Well, I thank you for that. I really do. I thank you for the kind words. I remember the first night that I worked, it just so happened that at the time when Global first did the big TV tapings, Bill Eadie was booking.
Yeah.
And I was in a match with Bill, and I thought, man, this is going to be a very quick match. We got in there, and the people were yelling for me, I guess because I was fighting back. But Bill was talking me through the match, and, he was saying kind words to me during the match. And I really respected Bill Eadie. I wish that he could have been there longer than what he was, but I certainly was happy when Eddie Gilbert took the job.
Yeah.
Too.
Those were some of our best times was when we had Eddie doing it. And hey, listen, Blackstone has just walked in, and let me grab her before she heads off somewhere. Hold on just a second. Let's put Boni on the phone. Hold on a minute.
Absolutely.
Hey, Terry. Hey, Bob. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, doing great now that we're talking to you.
Oh, wonderful. Listen, I've been listening some. Of course, you guys are online quite a bit, and I've been paying some attention on Facebook. Thank you for the invitation. You guys were talking about Global, and those were some of the fondest wrestling days for Joe and I that we can remember.
Well, we certainly appreciate everything that you did for Global. I know that I do. It was by far the biggest push that, I'd received in wrestling business. And, I worked hard for you guys, but you all worked hard for us as promoters.
You certainly did. Yeah, it was an interesting time back in our lives. We were newlyweds. I know Joe kind of touched a little bit on how we got into our personal relationship with the Atlanta wrestling block and how I had kind of won a contest to get into wrestling officially, as the fans would know me. I remember my very first time going out after I'd been on the air for about 3 weeks here in Atlanta. Of course, they had the national show with Gordon Soley, the Pro Wrestling This Week. They had been doing that for about a year. Joe had been hosting the local Atlanta block for about a year and a half. And I went to Starrcade after I'd been on the air about 3 weeks, and I was just floored by the number of people that came up and talked to Joe and me. It made actually the TV taping of the wrestling block the very next week a little difficult because I didn't just look at that red light on top of the camera as being my mom and dad anymore. That was thousands and thousands and thousands of people that were at the Omni in Atlanta last week. So it brought it into full scope for us. And then I remember when they were doing Pro Wrestling This Week, they wanted to add me to the show, but Gordon Soley at that time had said, you really need to think that one through. And the producers of the show said, well, she's young and she's cute and she can't do much damage if she just reads a male segment. And he said, yes, but she has such a strong accent. And boy, I guess I did, because the very first time they put me on, some of the letters that came out of New York and New Jersey and some of those places just could not believe my strong Southern accent needed to be cleaned up a little bit before I could go on a national TV show, Terry.
Where did you find that Georgia girl?
So they did. They kind of gave me some voice coaching for how to sound as neutral as possible, and how to have that broadcast quality in what was a very squeaky voice naturally. And I can say I really enjoyed working as we took that show from being an in-studio program to something that was on the road. Paul Heyman actually co-hosted that show with Joe for a while, and I co-hosted it for a little bit. We had Jerry Lawler on the show, and since Joe had working relationships with all of the different territories from Memphis to World Class to Vern Gagne's product, the AWA, Puerto Rico, just anywhere that there was wrestling, we already carried that syndicated show, which made also the possibilities for recruiting wrestlers into Global that much easier. But it made Pro Wrestling This Week a great program because it was easy for Joe to pick up the phone and personally get a Bill Watts on the phone and say, send me some interviews and send me some of your guys. We're doing Pro Wrestling This Week.
Wow, that's a great story. Let me ask you this, Boni. Did you have any kind of broadcasting background, and were you a wrestling fan basically when you won the contest?
I was kind of a wrestling fan, but I was also a young lady, to answer the second question first, in the sense that on Fridays and Saturdays, and of course Saturday nights being what was Georgia Championship Wrestling for 2 hours, and then Joe's program, Superstars of Wrestling, would come on between 8 and 3 a.m. So in Atlanta, between 6 p.m. and 3 a.m., you could see wrestling on Saturday night, just, to your heart's content. And I would catch wrestling before I went out on my date, and then I would come back home and wrestling would still be on again. So I was an in and out kind of fan, and there was a little chunk of it there in the middle when I would go out and grab a pizza with a date and kind of miss a little bit of that. But my parents were huge wrestling fans, and when they heard that I had won the contest, I walked downstairs after speaking with who I referred to at that time as Mr. Pedicino, and told him I was going to be his sidekick on that show. And they thought I was going to be Ed McMahon on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. They thought nothing could have been bigger in our family's life than for their oldest child to be on that wrestling show all Saturday night. So that was great. But to answer your first question now, I didn't have any broadcast experience. I was really a greenhorn straight out of high school. I had won a beauty pageant contest for Atlanta Motor Speedway, and I had been their Miss Motorcraft or Miss Atlanta 500. And then from there, I went to audition at the TV station, and I didn't really honestly think I had the wherewithal to have the job. I thought there were going to be a lot of candidates that could speak better and had attended way more matches than me. I'd only been to the Omni to attend one match and seen Hulk Hogan before, and I knew there was a lot of women there that wanted it, including Missy Hyatt's cousin. And I thought, oh, this is just a shoe-in. This is a way to bring Missy Hyatt's family member on board. But they'll work us all through this, and they'll make something out of it. I didn't know the word angle at that time. But my grandfather went and bought the family's first VCR and said, if one of us is going to be on the TV and it's not going to be on the 6 o'clock news, I want to get a copy of it. And bought a VCR and recorded me. I auditioned in a tuxedo once again, thinking I was not going to get the job, but it was more or less going to be Missy Hyatt's relative that was going to get the job. So I showed up kind of being myself, and as Joe said, kind of copping an attitude. They all wore business outfits or wrestling garb, T-shirts, and I wore a tuxedo and just figured this is my one shot. I'm going to make it good, and it ended up working in my favor.
Well, you certainly did make it good. And for the listeners that don't realize, Boni, you're about, 5 foot?
I'm 5'3", and that's what I'm Yeah, and I weigh about 120 pounds without the hair extensions in, so I'm not a very large person by any means.
No, and that was my point. Standing especially next to a lot of big wrestlers, I can remember, doing interviews with you that you were small, but yet you were commanding. You knew what you wanted. You were, you always a self-assured person. And I can see you going into that interview and just nailing it.
I appreciate that. By the time Global came around in Joe and my career, Joe had me on the air on the Superstars of Wrestling block. We had been hosting movies. We actually had wrestling on the local channel here Friday night for 2 hours. We had the LPWA and the women's organization PAL. And then on Saturday morning, we carried Vince McMahon's product because he didn't want to be a part at one time of a block. So we had to separate his programs out of the block. And then, of course, as I said, Turner's programs would come on, or Georgia Championship Wrestling would come on between 6 and 8, and then Joe's wrestling block would start at 8 and go off at 3 a.m. So by the time Global came around in my life, I had already done quite a bit of television locally, but this was, for me, the big time. This was before I went to work for Vince McMahon and went to work up at what was in the WWF. And, of course, it was an interesting time in our lives because Joe had just finished working for WCW at the time that he went to work and started Global. If we had had financial backing, I'm sure we had the talent, we had the believability, we had good storylines, great booking, and I think if we had just been funded, we'd have had a shot. Vince kept stealing some of it, and I don't blame him. Some of our great guys that as soon as we build one of them up, like Big Bully Busick or the Patriot, even Steve Austin. I mean, let's think about it. That was somebody local there in Dallas, Texas that had been a familiar face in the Sportatorium, and as soon as you get somebody over on TV, they can't resist bright lights, big city, and the opportunity. And I'll have to say Joe was pretty smooth about letting them go. He would wish them well, but just always remember where you came from, and if you want to come back, you can.
That's absolutely that's what I remember the most, we just had Del Wilkes on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he told the story about how he became the Patriot. And I didn't know the story. He said that you all called him over at the hotel about 2 hours before it was time to go to the building and pulled the costume out. And that was the first he'd heard of the Patriot.
Terry, I pulled that costume out of a brown sandwich bag. Let me tell you how that went. We were going to TV. We've been going to TV every Friday, flying American Airlines out to Dallas, doing TV that night. And what I will go on record as saying is the hottest building known to man. Forget the Sahara Desert. The Sportatorium in the middle of the summer is the hottest building known to man. You could fry an egg in the middle of that ring, flip it over, and hit the other side of it and not miss a beat. So one of our friends had said, I got a great gimmick, great idea, and he explained the concept of what the Patriot would be. So on the way to the airport, we drove through, did not stop our car, drove through a Waffle House parking lot. He had taken Dale's measurements, and we had given them to a seamstress to get the red, white, and blue tights and that mask custom made for him. I literally was running a little bit late. I held my hand out the window. I grabbed the brown bag. I stuck it in my carry-on, and he's right. We got to the building and said, we've got the costume. We have something we want to explain to you. We think this will really go over. I went to a party shop and bought a bunch of those handheld flags that he carried out to the ring and passed out to some of the fans, and the rest is history. He carried it off and had that great booming voice, and the whole synergy of the idea, the character, and Del Wilkes just came together, and it worked out to be great. He was a great North American champion. It was great
timing because, you know, wrestling's always used patriotism to a certain degree. Back in the old days of the beginning of TV, the Japanese, you know, had bombed Pearl Harbor, and they were the bad guys. And right then was Desert Storm. So it was a great time for a patriot character, and he was, you know, the Patriot. You know, he did a great job doing it. But I could see you carrying that outfit in a sandwich bag.
Wasn't sure I was even going to get it on the airplane. I mean, Joe had sat in meetings, and they had written the script for it. They knew they were going to be able to either pull that match out or put that in as a main event. We knew we wanted to have a strong presence as a North American champion, and it was just whether the seamstress could get it done the night before, and our contact could literally get it to the Waffle House off of Windy Hill, and we could slide from Kennesaw right off the ramp, get that outfit, get to the airport, and have it in the Sportatorium by taping time, and hopefully it would fit Dale, and it did. So it was great. Also, you know, Buff Bagwell, we came up with that great character for him, the handsome stranger, and I can remember sitting and sewing that little mask together and putting those rhinestones around the eyes, and we gave up, actually Billy E's wife came up with the idea for him to hold a rose in his mouth and give that to somebody coming down the aisle. So it was a great time in our lives. Joe and I had just gotten married, and this was a real exciting time for us. We got married on New Year's Eve and went to Dallas the next day. I did not have a honeymoon. I still remind him of that to this day. Did not have a honeymoon. I spent what would have been a honeymoon in Dallas, literally in a hotel, and God, we were down the street at one of the little restaurants across from the Anatole, and we were writing scripts, literally finishing the TV so that we could give it to video, Bob.
Wow, that's pretty good stuff there. I didn't realize it was that close and put together. You know, when you came in, the first few tapings where you brought everybody in, the Cactus Jacks, the Terry Gordys, the Adrian Streets, it just went so smooth. There was a lot of matches those nights, but it went smooth. And something that the people probably don't realize as they're watching it is since there was a show every day of the week on ESPN, a lot of times we were wrestling as wrestlers 3 times in one night to fill that TV spot. You know, when you said it was a hot building, try going 60-minute Broadway with Eddie in August in that building. Oh, my Lord.
Exactly. And then I feel for some of these guys because they would work for us on Friday night, and you probably made this journey yourself. They would all, Bull and Samantha Payne and Eddie and Doug and several of them would go and get in a car, not take a nap, not stay at the hotel. They would get in a car and drive to Memphis to be on Memphis Wrestling with Lance Russell and Dave Brown Saturday morning. So,
yeah, I did that before the global days. I actually did that during the WCW days with the Beauty and the Beast character.
Yep. We had a lot of people that did that very same thing because they were committed to both shows, and we knew that as long as you didn't go out there and, you know, do a job on Memphis TV, and you could still retain yourself if both products were seen, and retain your believability and not get hurt. You know, Joe didn't care if you went to Memphis and worked Saturday morning.
Well, that was the really good thing about that promotion is that y'all gave the wrestlers the freedom to go out and work other places. And as I was saying earlier, it was such an innovative show because Joe mentioned you up in the audience interviewing people, him at the desk talking about the other federations. It was such a different show than what your average WWF fan or WCW fan or the old NWA fan was used to, that I think that it had its own niche. Don't you agree?
Yeah, Terry, I'll tell you something. We decided early on if we were going to be on ESPN, we had to do a show that was different from the ones that people were used to seeing. And that's how that came up. Before we go on, you mentioned something a second ago, and it reminded me of a story, a quick thing. When we first put Eddie Gilbert in there and made him the booker, he had, you know, some preconceived ideas as any human would, but he had some guys that he wasn't sure of, and you were one of them. And he said, you know, this guy really looks good, but I don't know. And Eddie had a way, and that was he would put himself in a match against somebody. And he put himself in a match against you. And this wasn't the one where y'all went 60 minutes, but this was a long one. Y'all went like 25, 30 minutes. And when he came back and sat down, he looked over at me and he said, "We got a kid right there. We got a kid." He said, "We need to do something with him. He's good." And the one thing when Eddie really, really liked somebody, he had one thing he said. He would look at me and he would say, "Joey's got heart." He said that guy's got heart. When Eddie said that to me, I knew what he meant, and I knew what he was saying, and that's what he said about you when you came back, and you had gone, and it was toward the end of the night, and if I remember correctly, you had already worked. I know you'd worked once, and I think twice, but Eddie came back and sat down, and he said, "We got somebody with him, and he's got heart." And from that point on, that's when we said, okay, here's a kid we're going to start with and build him up. And I honestly believe in my heart, Eddie that night had made up his mind that you were going to be a champion, that he was going to put a belt on Terry Garvin.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with me. I'm sorry, Bonnie, do what?
I was going to say another good thing that, you know, Joe was talking about working once or twice in an evening when we were trying to build up our stars and build up our character. Joe was saying, well, to Eddie one night, where can we go get some guys? And he says, I got this covered. We're going to put one of the guys out there in one of the matches. And Joe said, well, yeah, we're running out of a dressing room full of guys. And he says, I got it covered. And Joe says, now what are you going to say? I'm telling you, boss, I got it covered. So down the aisle comes this guy in a full leotard. You know, Doug Gilbert had already worked once during the night. And I'm looking, and down the aisle comes the Dark Patriot, and Joe says, oh, my gosh, it's Doug. So you'd work once at the night as a babyface, as yourself, and then you'd work as a heel under a hood and come back out and do somebody a favor. So they ran a good operation as far as being able to utilize talent the most effectively that they could.
Absolutely.
And I will say this, Terry, and I'll say this to anybody that wants to hear it. you did good for us. You worked your butt off, and you never were a troublemaker, and whoever the booker was, whether it was Edie or Gilbert or whatever, you'd sit down with them and go over everything. And that was one of the reasons that we enjoyed using you. And we just had I like to say we had a good time with you, and that doesn't mean that's not a negative. It's a positive. We enjoyed. Look, let's be honest. You were there. There were some people we didn't enjoy working with. There were some guys out there. There were some guys out there that we knew had to be there because they were, a name, but it wasn't a lot of fun. I remember some of those too. I'm not going to go into them. You know who they were. But, of course, then we had, Bonnie will remember this guy's name, the guy that kept showing up from Atlanta. He drove to the Sportatorium every Friday, and he was never on the card. We never had hired him. We weren't using him. But he drove to the Sportatorium every Friday. And after a while, Eddie came up to me and said, I got to put him in a match. He said, if for nothing else, just for having the determination. And he said, all the guy wants, he said, Joe, he's not going to be a star, and he's not going to do anything. But he said, I'm going to put him out there in a match. I'm going to let him say that he was on Global at the Sportatorium one time. So he did. He put him out there, and the guy, didn't do that well. But to this day, he's able to look around and say, yeah, I was part of that Global Wrestling Federation.
You got to admire somebody with the tenacity to drive from Atlanta this week.
and that's what Eddie said. Eddie said, Joe, he's driven out here now for about 8 weeks. He said, I can't do it anymore. He said, I'm going to put him in a match. And so he did. And but I tell you what, I look back I look back at Global. It was one of the hardest times of my life, but I look back at it as one of the best times of my life too, because I got to meet a lot of the guys in the business that I've remained friends with, and humbly I will say we put on a hell of a TV show, and let me tell you. Think about this. WWF at the time was producing 3 hours a week of television. WCW, or NWA at the time, was producing 3 hours of television. Poor old Global is sitting over there, and we're producing 6 hours a week of television. And ESPN had a rule. We couldn't duplicate a lot of stuff. We could show highlights from another show, but there was no such thing as, man, that was a good match. Let's just put that whole match in show number 7. Their rule was that you had to have fresh material for almost all of each hour. So, we spent a lot of time planning those shows, and you guys spent a lot of time in the ring giving us enough matches to do that. But I'm very proud of the product that we put out on ESPN as the Global Wrestling Federation. And by the way, let's also mention that we had 2 hours a week syndicated all across the country too.
That's right. There was a syndication, there was the ESPN, and then you had a local show that ran in Dallas.
Yeah.
I mean, Theo Bob was constantly working and editing tape. Oh, that.
Yeah. And of course, those were, that's how we met Bob Hazelwood too. Is that we saw Bob and saw him. He was there all the time and started talking to him and realized that he was more than just a wrestling fan. That he was pretty intelligent about the business and everything. So the next thing you knew, We had a guy that lived in Dallas and almost became our unofficial representative in Dallas because I was talking to Hazelwood on a regular basis about what we're going to do Friday night and everything. So we met some good people out there.
Yeah, one of my fondest
is how you all met.
Do it now?
We met actually through CompuServe. I was on a wrestling message board, chat room kind of thing, and Joe Pedicino popped in one night. And, of course, no one believed that it was Joe Pedicino. We were all harassing him, thinking that he was just some schmuck who had come in and had changed his nickname to Joe Pedicino and gave him a hard time. But, Joe proved himself that he was who he said he was, and, we were just talking, and then he brought up, hey, we're doing global. We're going to be in Dallas. I'm like, I'm in Dallas. I'll be there. So, I got a chance to show up, and funny story, I told Terry this, but I don't think I've ever told you this, Joe. The first night we're down there, and because I'm, just a wrestling fan who knows a little bit more than the average wrestling fan, and not anything more than that. I've never pretended to be anything close to being an insider in the business. But Joe introduces me to Bill Eadie's wife, and he says, this is Bob Hazelwood. He's my friend. Turns back and says, my smart friend. Well, this is how stupid I am, or I was. It took me 2 hours to figure out what the hell you meant.
Yeah, you weren't smart then, were you?
No, not so smart. That's an odd way to introduce somebody.
You were just smart enough to be dangerous.
Exactly. Now, I remember one of the fondest memories I've got, though, is the night that in the North American tournament when the Patriot had defeated Al Perez in that final. And I don't remember if the referee botched the finish or Al jumped up too early, but basically he had his foot on the ropes at the end of at the pin, and the crowd suddenly turned on their big babyface hero and got all hostile because even though Perez was the heel, he was the Dallas heel, and the local folks were that he got screwed. And I remember sitting in that dang Denny's after the match, everyone trying to figure out how the heck we're going to save our babyface hero, who we just buried by a bad finish. And then ended up having given the title away, winning it back again, and that goes on to become Bill Apter's Inspirational Wrestler of the Year story. All because of a bot finish.
Yeah, let me tell you that there were some heavy debate that night because there were some of them were saying, just forget it. Everybody will forget it by next week. And I'm sitting there, and I said, I don't think so. I said, I got a feeling our pal the Patriot's going to get booed when he walks in there next week. And sure enough, they did. But you're right. We had figured out, okay, we're going to do something. We'll prove just how pure heart the Patriot is. He's going to give the title back, and we're going to have that match again. And that's all it took. They had a match. And Perez really worked hard at putting the Patriot over, and the Patriot won the match with that Patriot missile, and bam, there he was. He was the good guy again.
And bigger than ever.
Well,
yeah,
what you all realize, I guess, at the time was Al Perez was pretty over in Dallas through the world-class days, and he still had some fans there. And when you give it a little bit of a dinky finish because of the referee, it's going to get booed.
Yeah, we found that out. We realized at about 11:45 that night that Al Perez still had a bunch of fans in Dallas. So, but you're right, Bob. That led to one of the most unusual storylines ever, and that is starting off the show the next week with the Patriot handing the belt back and saying, I want to wrestle Al Perez tonight. I don't want to win that way. I didn't know he had his foot on the rope, so I don't want to win that way. So here's the belt, and let's have the match again. People couldn't believe it. People could not believe that the champion would give the belt back. But of course,
and they had a heck of a match, though. Like you said, that return match was. Al did work his behind off, and Dell really put in a match. in the ring. And the thing about Dallas fans is they liked you if you fought. You know, you could lose, it wouldn't matter as long as you fought in the ring and just, fought your heart out.
Let me tell you, you're right. The Dallas wrestling fans, to me, one of the things that made them different was they did not, your respect was not based on winning and losing. Your respect was based on the effort you gave in the ring. And, in Atlanta, just to be honest, you could have some guy that would go in there and give his heart and bust his butt and do everything but lose the match, and then he's a loser. But in Dallas, if that happened, he walked out of the ring with almost as much respect as the guy who got his hand raised. But hold on a minute. Bonnie's telling me she's got a memory. Hold on a minute.
I had a cute story for you guys that you'll probably remember being there that night. Most people remember in the early 90s, we lived in Kennesaw, and so did Eddie Gilbert and Missy Hyatt. Missy Hyatt was my best friend back in those days. And John Horton, of course, who was Craig Johnson on the air, also lived close by, so they would have the booking meetings at my house. Well, Eddie and Missy had gone through a separation, which would eventually lead to a divorce. And Eddie, at that time, was dating Medusa Michelli. And Missy Hyatt had gone on, and she was dating Jason Hervey from the Wonder Years show. And her next-door neighbor was Buff Bagwell, and he was getting ready to come out to Global to be in the TV for Joe. And he went next door, and he goes, Missy, give me some pointers as to what my look should be. We hadn't come up with the character for the handsome stranger yet. What should my look be? How should I wear my hair? How do I need to walk out there? Because you've done this longer than me, and I want to do a real good job. And finally, before leaving our house to get ready to get on the plane, he says, I don't have any boots. Oh, my gosh, I don't have any boots. So she goes to the closet, and she says, I got some boots for you. Here, go take these. What size is your foot? You'll be able to wear these. So that night in Dallas next day, it was supposed to be Eddie Gilbert against Buff Bagwell. So they both had their introductions. They both lock up, and they're both looking at the floor. And, of course, I guess Buff is waiting on Eddie to call the match, and he looks up and says, where'd you get those boots? And Buff said, don't worry about it. And he goes, no, where'd you get those boots? And he said, Missy got them out of your closet. Those are your boots. I didn't have any boots to wear. So Missy was really notorious for giving away a lot of things that belonged to other people in her life. One time she gave away one of John Tatum's old robes and gave it to somebody that wore it to a TV taping to get busted by John once upon a time that also walked up and said, hey, where'd you get that robe? It's got JT on it. Hey, your ex gave it to me. So you never know.
I've got a really funny story that you'll both enjoy. Everybody will enjoy this. But Eddie asked me to come in early. He wanted to talk some booking for like the next month. We were right in the middle of all that angle with he and I come in, and it was early. It was like an hour and a half maybe before the match just started, 2 hours maybe. And he said, come up here, I want to show you something. And I said, what? Well, we was back in that little office that he used. It used to be Gary Hart's booking office. And he said, just come with me, just come with me. We walked up in the cage and are watching the ring, and Medusa Michelli's down there in the ring absolutely kicking guys' asses. It was guys that were training, that they were working in the ring with. And I mean, she's shooting on them and just tearing people left and right. He said, you want to go down and get in the ring with her? I said, are you freaking nuts? I got to wrestle you 3 times tonight. Hell no, I don't want to get my ass kicked by her first.
I don't blame you.
Tough woman. We got a couple of callers. Do y'all mind if, I know we're running out of time, but do y'all mind if we take some callers with questions for you?
No, that's fine.
Bob, can we do that?
Sure, let's bring on Ryan from Maryland. Ryan, you're on with Terry, Joe, and Bonnie.
My question's for Joe. It's about Max the injuries. Was there anyone else planned to be the boss in the Global Wrestling Federation cartel storyline?
Well, no, not really. The whole thing in the beginning was it was going to be Max. And the problem was, Lord love Max, I love him, but the closer we got to exposing it, he got all funky on us. And he was, well, I'm a businessman here. What if it hurts my reputation here in Dallas? And it's like, Max, it's a wrestling show. So we had to come up with 2 or 3 alternatives. But then at the last minute, we convinced Max that none of them made sense. Max, the only thing that makes sense is if for me, and I had to say to Max, I promise you, do this. Give me a month or so, and I will turn it around, and you'll turn out being a baby face. And that was the only way he went along with doing it.
The thing that you really couldn't, I don't know if you knew this, Ryan, but Max Andrews was the man that produced the television. He's the guy that went to NAPTY. He's probably the one that sold it to ESPN, wasn't he, Joe?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so Max Andrews Productions, Max wasn't just a face for that. He was actually a pretty important part of the wrestling that came out of the Dallas area for quite a few years there.
Oh yeah, Max was one of the owners with us. I mean, Max was a big deal, and I think that's why he got so nervous. But let me tell you, we never had a plan that said after we exposed Max as the boss, we'll turn it around, that he was really a good guy doing it undercover. You know, to me, Max Andrews being the boss was one of the best plot lines we ever did. Again, think about it for a minute. We were one of the first companies that had the head of the company be a heel. This was before Mr. McMahon. This was before the Authority and all that. We were the first company that had the guy that was supposedly in charge turn out to be a bad guy, raising hell and causing trouble. No, in the beginning, the whole thing was for Max Andrews to be the boss, and luckily it worked out.
Okay. Fine. Thanks for your call. We got another caller holding, and I want to do another segment with both Joe and Boni, if Bonnie's still around. But we got one more caller real quick, Bob.
Dennis from Alabama, you are on with Joe and Boni.
Well, guys, how y'all doing tonight?
Doing fine. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I have a question to ask Joe and Boni. I know y'all live in Georgia and all. Did y'all know the promoter in Columbus, Georgia, real well named Fred Ward? Do you have any good Fred Ward stories?
I met Fred several times, but I honestly didn't really have any dealings with him or anything. When I met him, he was a very gracious person, and I do know this, that back in those days, wrestling in Columbus, Georgia was about as wild as anywhere in the country. They had some real crazy stuff going on down there, and you know, everybody. Terry, I don't know if you ever worked for Fred, but wrestlers always told me they knew that if they were going to go in and spend some time working in Fred's territory, that there's one of those you never know what's going to happen things.
No, I never did work for him, but that's a good question. I've heard stories. Yeah. That's it.
And also, Joe. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. That's all right.
Okay. And one other guy that he did announcing wrestling in Georgia before Gordon Solo did. How about Ed Capral? How well did you know Ed Capral?
I knew Ed. It's funny. Ed and I knew each other before I got into wrestling because Ed had an advertising agency in Atlanta. Right. And he handled some pretty good accounts here. And so when I was in advertising sales, I knew Ed Capral in that. And I watched Ed Capral on TV here for years. And then lo and behold, one day I told him, I said, Ed, you're not going to believe this. As a matter of fact, Ed Capral was one of the first people I called when the radio station came to me and asked me would I host the wrestling. I called Ed and I said, Ed, you're not going to believe what they want me to do. He laughed. He said, man, all I can tell you is this, go for it. Go ahead. He said, look, have a good time. He said, you know, and then Ed was a businessman. He said, look, if you're on TV, think about how much easier it's going to make selling. I said, well, that's a good point. So, but Ed was a great guy.
Oh, good.
All right.
Well,
Thanks, Dennis.
guys,
All right, Dennis, thanks for calling. And we have a question from the chat room, was asked a little bit earlier. Wanted to know where Joe took Boni on their very first date.
Oh, Lord. Technically, our very first date was the Christmas party. Neither one of us were seeing anybody at the time. And so we just said, I told her, I said, well, you want me to come pick you up and we'll go to the Christmas party, just as the wrestling division, just together. And she said, yeah. And so we went to the Christmas party, had a real good time. And so I guess it was a couple of weeks later, I asked her, if she wanted to go get something to eat. And I'll tell you what kind of gal she is. She said, yeah, she wanted to go eat. And I said, I'll take you wherever you go. Where you want to go? So our first date was at the Varsity in Atlanta. She wanted to go to the Varsity, which, of course, most people in Atlanta would go along with. But that just led, one thing to another. Next thing you knew, we were seeing each other all the time.
Get this straight. You took her to a Christmas party on your first date, and then you didn't take her on a honeymoon, and she's still with you.
Yep.
You're doing something right. I don't know what
That's
it is.
one fine woman.
Well, it just turned out that way. I tell people all the time, God knew what he was doing.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to play a little game with you guys. Is Boni still around too?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask you all about some people. You can answer with one word or one sentence. I know that's going to be awful hard, but I want to get your opinions on people. Okay?
Go for it.
Gordon Soley.
Genius. Just phenomenal.
Class act.
Yeah. Gordon Soley was one of the best people I've ever known in my life. How's that?
That's great. That's what I'm looking for. Bill Eadie.
Now I'll use it. Class act. One of the first really big stars I ever worked with on a business basis, and could not respect anybody more.
Sense of humor.
Yes, that's true. He did have a great sense of humor.
Yeah, he did have a great sense of humor. He sure did. Huh, okay, thank you. Eddie Gilbert.
God, what?
Wish he was here.
Yeah. Again, I'll use the word genius. Just phenomenal, and a great friend.
Yeah. All right. I'll go along with that also. How about?
And I'm going to cheat a little bit. If Eddie Gilbert was still with us, he would be one of the biggest names in professional wrestling. I don't know what he'd be doing, but I guarantee you he would be one of the biggest names in professional wrestling because he was a frigging genius.
He was like a mad scientist. And he was 20 years ahead of his time. He was one of the first boys that I know. When the kayfabe sheets came out, I can remember all the wrestlers talking about, oh, don't read those things. They're trash. The guy will trash you. But then you walk into the dressing room and sure enough, there's a kayfabe sheet and it's getting passed around. But Eddie Gilbert listened to the fans and what the fans wanted before any other promoters. Before that, the promoters were just kind of trying to push the fans into what they wanted. But Eddie, what went on the computer and things like that, he had his ear tuned to it, don't you think?
Let me tell you something. When I first met Eddie Gilbert, and we were talking about him coming and booking Global for me, he said, Joe, I'll tell you right now, one of the biggest mistakes that promoters and bookers make is they tell the fans what it is they're going to like. Instead, it's got to be the other way around. We have to listen to the fans and find out what it is they like and then give it to them. And that was his philosophy. And Eddie, you know, you're talking about the computer wrestling forums and all that. A lot of people don't know this, but Eddie, from very early on, Eddie was on almost every wrestling chat room there was. He was on the CompuServe thing that Bob was talking about, and he was in constant contact with the people who wrote the sheets and everything. He just never did any of it under his name. But he would be on every one of these chat rooms. He would be on every one of the forums and everything, but under another name. And his sole purpose, he wasn't trying to trick anybody or anything. His sole purpose was to get feedback from the wrestling fans so that it would give him a guidance on where he needed to take it.
Absolutely. I knew that. I absolutely knew that. He sat and explained that to me, and I thought, well, I remember, you know, when he told me what he was doing and the reason he was doing it, you know, I never asked. You knew me. You could tell me what to do, and 99 times out of 100, I'd do it. Now, occasionally, you know, I'd say, well, wait a minute now. But that wasn't the case with Eddie, and he told me that, you know, I go on these chat rooms and I talk to these people, but they don't know they're talking to me. And I found that very interesting. Let's get on to the next couple, okay? Both of you are going to, I think, maybe have a little bit of difference of opinion here on this one, but this ought to be a good one. My old pal Budrow, Buddy Landell.
I like Buddy. You know, he was a handful. But you know, Buddy was one of those guys that drove you nuts. But in the end, he, you know, put on a hell of a show, and in the end, you could convince Buddy to I hate to use this sentence, but do what was best for business. And he was just, you know, Buddy was just Buddy.
Preacher
man. Yeah, preacher man. There you go.
Preacher man. That's one way you could describe him. Okay. Sean Waltman.
Great high flyer.
One of the best finds that we had. I mean, when we brought in, you know, the Lightning Kid, he was just something else. He was amazing for his time. You look now, and the truth of the matter is, half the guys do the stuff he does that he used to do. But back then, they didn't. Back then, it was unusual to have a guy go flying around the ring and up and down the ropes and everything. And Sean was just an amazing. He was especially great for TV. I loved having Sean on TV.
I agree. These three, going to go real quick, is John Horton or Craig Johnson.
My son.
I loves me some John Horton. Outstanding talent, multi-Emmy winner, not just in wrestling, roller derby, but any kind of sports. He takes his craft seriously. He gets there early, and he calls it like he sees it. Outstanding worker bee.
He's a great talent, but he's also, I mean, he really is like an adopted son. He is a great human being, and, you know, we just love John to death.
Okay. Scott Hudson.
About the same. He's a very close friend of ours, and he's one of those friends that we don't see, all the time. But every once in a while, we all get together, and we just love Scott. And Scott was another person that turned out to be a great piece of talent that nobody we just didn't know that he would turn out to be as good as he was.
Outstanding sense of humor. Smart guy.
Good. I concur with all that. Stephen DeTruth or Stephen Prazak.
Oh God, not at all like the character. Prazak is just a class guy, and he's so intelligent and just a phenomenal sense of humor. And he's the one that came to us when we were doing Georgia wrestling and said, "You need somebody to be anti-Hudson. Hudson's the good guy, and he just sits there and he just knows everything about wrestling, and y'all built him up as this character. Y'all need somebody to be up against him." And he's the one that came up with the character. He came back and said, let me do a thing with him. And he came back with point counterpoint, and then we just cracked up. And from that point on, he was part of the whole thing.
I never knew how that came about. What was your thoughts, Bonnie?
Outstanding guy. He makes some of the television of Match Gets Boring worth watching because he can pick up on that and he can revive the energy on something and make you stick around until the match finishes. He understands the psychology of the business very well and can interject the right thing at the right time. Let
me tell you real quick. We were doing a live show in Marietta, Georgia, and it was a pretty good size show in for us what was a good size auditorium here. And he came to me with an idea, and he said, I want to be in the ring wrestling for the first time ever. And I said, huh? And he said, I want to wrestle the Blue Blazer. And at that time, the Blue Blazer was, of course, big deal. And I said, we're not bringing Owen in. He said, just trust me. I said, okay. So he makes this big deal in his segment for 2 or 3 weeks about he's going to be in the ring that night, and he's taking on the Blue Blazer. He's tired of people taking him for granted. Well, and I swear I did not know this. He did not tell me ahead of time what he was doing. I figure he's going to bring some little scrawny runt in there wearing a mask, He walks out. They make the ring announcements, and he holds up a Blue Blazer sports coat. Throws it all around the ring, slams it down, gives it an elbow, lays on top of it, and the referee counts 3. And he goes off on how he just beat the Blue Blazer.
Wow.
It was the funniest thing to happen around here in a long time. The wrestling fans died laughing. And, of course, Hudson, on the air the next week, Hudson gave him hell, but all he kept saying was, I beat the Blue Blazer. I beat the Blue Blazer.
Wonder what Owen Hart would have thought about that.
Well, I mentioned that to him. I said, you do know that if you ever look up and see Owen Hart standing there, you best run.
Yep.
He said, that's why I didn't tell you what I was doing. I said, all right. I said, I can honestly look Owen Hart in the eyes and say, Owen, I didn't know what he was going to do.
Okay, guys, we're getting real close on time, but I've got 3 or 4 more things I want to hit. But last 2 people, real quick. Gray Pearson.
Didn't really have that much dealings with him. So I mean, honestly, I can't give you a read on him because I didn't have that much to do with him.
Okay, fair enough. Bonnie, anything you want to object?
No, it's kind of the same way, kind of neutral, neither favorable or disfavorable, just somebody that came through our lives at a time when we were really entrenched in wrestling pretty deep.
Okay. Last person is my arch nemesis, the outlaw Joel Deaton.
Love Joel. I still get Facebook from Joel. he still lives here in the Atlanta area. Unfortunately for Joel, he never got the opportunity to do the cowboy part on the big stage. But Joel Deaton did the evil, nasty cowboy as good as anybody that I saw doing it back then. I mean, you could, in my opinion, we could have taken a Black Bart and a Joel Deaton and somebody like that, and those two could have been a great team. I was a little bit surprised that Joel wasn't one of the ones that Vince McMahon went after.
One of these days I need to post my wedding pictures because Joel Deaton brought his bullwhip to our wedding reception and cracked it all over the place, but it was great for the photos.
Yeah, he was walking around our wedding reception popping that bullwhip.
Yeah, that sounds like my buddy. That sounds just like him. Okay, guys, thanks for playing that with me. I want to get on because we're really running close on time, and I appreciate all the time you spent with us. I know that the listeners are loving it. I want to ask you about the time that you left Global. What was that like for you? I mean, it was your baby, and was it just enough's enough? Was it? It was. You saw the writing on the wall. Tell me about that, please.
Is the combination of it all. To be honest with you, we were so tired of flying out every week and being away from home. A lot of people don't realize this, but we were gone from home every week from Wednesday through Sunday. We'd fly back in on Sunday. We'd be here Monday and Tuesday, and on Wednesday we were flying right back out again. That and we saw that. Just to be honest, we saw that Max was having money problems, and it came down to just everybody sitting down and saying, okay, this is what's best. And so we stepped away from it, it unfortunately, and I don't blame Max Andrews for this, it was all he could do, but unfortunately it went back to just being basically a Dallas show with using the guys that were there in Dallas, and that was okay. There were some good hands like you, but it was a lot different because he wasn't able to bring in, some of the people that would have made the show, good and would have made it big time again. So it all happened, and people ask me, well, are you upset over how it went? No, I look at Global. And I look at our time in Dallas that was a blessing, and it went well, and we met a lot of great people, and we had a lot of good times, and things went well, but it was just time for it to end. And I will tell you that Miss Blackstone, I don't know if she's going to tell you this or not, but she really was worn out. I mean, it was taking a toll on her.
It was one of those situations when you run out of money, you can't use who you want to use, you can't book the matches and the quality TV that you want to. So when you lose the fun out of it, you lose the passion out of it, and it's time to move on and do something else. But that was around 92, and Joe and I did return in 94 to Dallas and work for Jim Crockett out there in the Sportatorium, but it wasn't Global by then, so it didn't last long after we left.
But and let me explain the statement she made just now. She didn't mean it to sound like when we left the whole thing just fell apart. It was timing. It just after we left, things just didn't have the opportunity that it should have had. And if it hadn't been for guys like you, Terry, I don't think it would have lasted for as long as it did. They still had the Dallas guys, and there were 3 or 4 of you that were, top quality names.
You know who I miss? Jim Weaver, Scandal Akbar.
You know who I miss? The guy that ran the concession stand. Let me tell you, that was some of the greatest food in the world.
World famous French fries.
Oh, Lord. Now, when we found out why the hot dogs and the French fries tasted so good, it sort of, we haven't changed the grease in 4 years. Oh, okay. But, it was something. Terry, we appreciate you having us on. This has been a great time.
Hey, Joe, before we let you go, we've got one more quick caller. This is the masked luchador from Parts Unknown. You're on the air with Joe Boni.
I couldn't hear you. Who is it?
Well, he's not answering, so I'm not sure if he's listening.
Yeah, hello there. How you doing? Hello?
Hey. Hello.
I don't know if you recognize that voice, Joe. That is the king of Section D.
I'm sorry. Joe and Boni, got a quick question for you. Loved hearing the stories tonight. Y'all did a great job in Dallas. I'm one of those fortunate ones that got to see it firsthand, and a lot of great memories. You brought them all back tonight. But one quick question for you. Do you still follow wrestling? And if you do, what's your opinion of today's product?
Yes, I still follow it. I watch quite a bit of it. It's real simple. You just have to pick a time and place and say, that's when it changed. It's not what it used to be. And if you enjoy it today, it's because you enjoy the TV show, the spectacle, and stuff like that. And, you know, I look at what we used to do. I shouldn't say we, because we weren't ever in the ring. But I look at what wrestling used to be and what it is today, and I just have to, it's two different products. You can't really say that today's product's not good, because when you look at guys like Seth Rollins, or you look at, I mean, just look at the Shield. I mean, I got to be honest with you, that's three of the best guys I've seen in years. And you've got to know that Reigns is going to be a megastar. And, you know, it's just, it's just different. I tell people you can like what it used to be and still like what it is today. You just don't say that it's the same. The soap opera has become so much more important than it used to be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I totally agree with that. Oddly enough, I watch more wrestling than anyone else that I know. And you just rattled off a series of names who I don't have a clue who they are, because I haven't seen a second of WWE product since 2002. And I finally threw in the towel on TNA a couple of months ago. So right now I'm down to 1 hour of televised wrestling a week, and that would be ROH.
That's a great promotion. But I got to tell you, if you will just let your mind start over, the WWE product for today is a great product. Triple H is going to be one of the greatest. Triple H is going to follow Mr. McMahon's footsteps so perfectly, and you know they got some great guys. Terry, I mean you got to look at the guys that are working for him right now, and you know there's a few that are gimmicky and everything, and maybe not the greatest in the ring, but at the same time they got some phenomenal storytellers up there now. And, you know, hey, look, what can you say? You know, they started the Wrestling Network, and people are talking about how it's not, well, you know, it's not as popular as it should be. Well, hell, they're approaching 1 million subscribers.
Yeah, and give it time.
Yeah.
Give it time.
And so actually, as far as that goes, they were almost at 1 million prior to its initial broadcasting, and they have added virtually nothing to it.
No, that's not true. That's not so. They've
every report I've seen.
No, you're comparing total people that were there during the free trial to subscribers. I'm talking actual paid subscribers. And
okay, now was there ever actually a free trial? Wasn't the
initial offer, $9.95 a month, if you committed to 6 months?
No,
the first week was always free.
Yeah, well, actually, the first
week.
month. The first month, you could join and not join for 6 months. You could get in there, and they had 807,000 people who signed on, but they only had about 600,000 of them who subscribed. Well, now they're up to over 900,000. They'll hit 1 million soon. Now, 1 million people paying you $10 a month. That's
you do the math.
Yeah, that's $10 million a month in subscriptions. So obviously, there are a lot of people out there that, and let me tell you, I'm not getting paid for this, but if you haven't tried the network and you're a wrestling fan, you're crazy. For $10 a month.
But they're not offering anything I don't already have on my shelf.
Hey, hold on a second, guys. We're getting ready to be right at an hour and a half. We're going to go for just a few more minutes. We've got 15 minutes more time that people will be listening on the archive show, and I'm sorry about that. Let me hit a few things real quick. First of all, Joe, do you know who you're talking to? Do you know who that is on the phone?
No, not really.
It's Freddie Fargo.
Oh, my Lord!
I didn't think you knew who you were talking to, but I was having fun listening to y'all banter back and forth.
Well, if I had known that, Freddie wouldn't like anything the WWE did, no matter what.
You're absolutely right.
That's what I had to tell you. Let me throw something in real quick about this.
Oh, Lord, do I miss Freddie Fargo. God, did we ever?
Don't we all?
Joe, I got to tell you this, since you brought up so many great stories about Global tonight. My all-time favorite line on a Global show was Scott Levy. He was doing color commentary with you. I just happened to walk a few feet away from him, and he said to you, "Hey, Joe, look, there goes Freddie Fargo. He's the guy that changed the word fax into 3 letters." As in FAX.
Yeah, let me tell you, Scott, there was a sense of humor. Now, it was a strange sense of humor, but Levy, he had some of the best lines. You're absolutely right. When he and Eddie were supposed to be buddies, and he was doing color commentary with Horton, he had some of the funniest lines. I would sit there and just crack up. Scott Anthony, yeah.
He was a town.
Joe, quick question for you. Earlier tonight, I heard you put the name John Horton and the words roller derby into the same sentence. What did he have to do with roller derby?
When he moved to Dallas, he got involved in their local roller derby league, and he was the announcer for the local roller derby league there in Dallas.
You need to go look him up on Facebook. All of his roller derby stuff with the Devils is on Facebook right now. A lot of great photos, too.
Yeah, you get a good kick out of it.
Was that the group that was at the Metroplex Arena?
No, this is not the worked roller derby. This is the current actual competition product that's out there now.
Yeah, there's evidently there's like a league there, but he got. I'll never forget when he emailed me and he said, "Dad, you're not going to believe what I'm getting ready to do." And I said, "John, how much worse could it be?" And he said, "It's roller derby."
And this is the same man that produced television for the Sonics out of Seattle, right? Emmy Award winner.
Right. Right. All right. That's the last I had heard of John.
Let me tell you, John, the thing what I love about John does the stuff he loves. He loves basketball, and he got involved up in Washington, not only with the Sonics, but he got involved with the college up there. And then he turns right back around and he's doing local wrestling up there. Then he moves to Dallas for a job, and next thing I know, he's doing roller derby down there. So, Lord love him. I told him a long time ago, do what you enjoy doing, and you'll have a good life.
Now, is he affiliated with the Texas Roller Derby League? Is that where he is? Because they have a team in Dallas and Austin. Is that what he's working with?
He's in Dallas, yeah.
Okay, great, because I'm the world's biggest roller derby fan. So
look him up. I am sure he would just absolutely love to talk to you he's in Dallas.
That's kind of funny great. Because now he's one of the only few that's called wrestling and roller derby, which are the only two sports I consider that you should be able to bet on.
They're the only two legitimate sports. That's right.
Yeah.
All right, Freddie, thank you. We are so far into overtime, we've got to wrap this up, folks. Hate to be the harbinger of bad news, but that time flew by so fast.
All right. Well, listen, we appreciate you having us on. It was fun. It was great talking to you, Bob, and to you, Terry, and to you, Freddie.
Absolutely. Can we ask you one last question? What are you doing now, Joe? What are you and Boni now into?
We own a radio station here in Atlanta. A lot of people don't know it, but I was in radio before I did any of this. I started in radio when I was 13 years old, and we went back into it. We've owned a total of 5 radio stations here in the area now, and right now we're concentrating on one called 92.5 The Bear, and we're being very blessed. God is blessing us tremendously, but we're just having a ball running a FM radio station here in the Atlanta market.
As well, God should, because I tell you what, they don't make people any better than you and Boni, my friend.
Thank you very much, Terry.
And that will put a wrap on this episode of Wrestling World Domination Remastered. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully it won't be 6 years before the next episode comes out. In the meantime, for the late, great Terry Garvin, I'm Bob Hazelwood. Peace out, everyone. Be good to each other.